Welcome back to Design Build Launch. This is episode 3. If you missed the last one, there's a link on the screen now or in the description below. In today's video, we're going to build our hero section of our professional portfolio here in Framer. We're going to set up a custom cursor with different states so that when we hover over on the side, we have this nice gradient that shows up and this cool image that hovers over as well. So with all that said, let's get started. All right, so here in Framer, I'm going to tab over to the Layers panel just so we can start working here. Let's select the desktop and go ahead and set its default opacity down to our 800 color that we used in our original design. So if we head over to Figma, we can see what we have here. We're going to have a navigation up top. It's very simple, but for now, we're going to focus on the hero section. So we have basically 3 columns here. We have the one on the left, the one in the center, and the one on the right. So that's what we'll create first. So the first thing I'm going to do is hit F on the keyboard for the frame tool, or you can go up here and select frame. And I'm just going to drag one out. And we're going to go over here and double click on the name. And I'm going to call it hero section just so I know what section it is. And by default, this is a fixed height and width. So let's change that to relative. And I want this to be 100% of the page. And then I want the height to be viewport, which is 100% viewport. And that will make sure it extends from the top to the bottom of our browser when we're looking at this on the web. Now we can go here on our actual desktop itself, and we can change these fixed values. So height here, I'm going to go ahead and change this to fit content. And then our width will leave at 1568. So now if we were to create multiple sections, you'll see that our desktop extends downward to fit the rest of this content. I'm also going to go ahead and remove that gap there because we don't want any gap in between sections for now. And then I'm just going to delete this duplicate hero section. So now we have a hero section to work with. Let's extend the viewport out to about 1024 just by clicking and dragging down. And that'll give us a similar size canvas to what we have in Figma. So the next thing I'm going to do is remove the fill color. Next, let's create a new frame inside of this one. And we're going to call this horizontal group. And we'll make sure the width is 100%. And the height is going to be set to fill. Since we have the parent set to 100% viewport, it will fill the entire screen. And this group is going to be where we have our 3 columns. So I'm going to remove the fill. And then I'm going to drag out a new frame here. And then I'm going to copy this 2 times so that we have 3 of them. And we can select the horizontal group parent and we can add a layout to this. So this is very similar to in Figma, a auto layout. This is called a stack. We can either do this horizontally or vertically. In this case, we're going to do it horizontally, which matches our design. We have 3 horizontal columns. And here I'm going to go and lower the gap down to 0. And then we can name each one of these frames just to stay nice and organized. So I've just named them left, center, and right. So the center, we want this to stretch to fill out the screen. So we'll go to width and we'll set that to fill. That's going to set it to 1 fraction. And we also want the height to fill as well. So that's going to stretch to the top. Now for the left and right, these are going to be hard values, meaning they're going to be fixed at 200 pixels wide. Just because this is just here for that nice little hover effect and a bit of text that's not very wide. So I know exactly that 200 will make sure that fits perfectly. So I'm going to set that to 200. And then I'm going to set the height to fill. And then I'm going to do the same thing here for the right column, 200 and fill. If I remove the fill off the center section, you can see we have the columns here on the side and the one in the center. Let's go ahead and also remove the fills off the left and right columns. So now we have 3 blank columns. So in the center section, we have those 3 layers of text. So I'm going to grab the text tool with T on the keyboard, or you can grab it up here. And then I'm going to type in our first word, which is intuitive. And we'll go to our text styles. And I'm going to set it to heading 1 initially, which is going to set everything so I don't have to repeatedly do it. And then I'm going to do kind of what we did in Figma. I'm going to break it by removing that, because now I want to customize this a little bit. So we're going to make this one black, and then we're going to make the color white. And then for this particular one, I'm going to lower the line height down to just 1. And then we're going to duplicate this 3 times. I'm holding Option or Alt and dragging those out. And then I'm going to change our text. Then for the word minimalistic, I'm going to drag the alpha or the opacity all the way down to 0%. Under text, we have more than just the default styles here. We can add them with the plus. And here we have stroke, so we'll add that. And I'm going to set this to white. And then I'm going to bump it up to a width of 2. And that looks much better. Now we need to align these. And we're not going to do that by dragging these. We're going to do it with the parent section. It's a really nice thing to keep everything nice and responsive. And that is by using stacks or similar to an auto layout in Figma. So here I have the center selected. I'm going to add a layout to this. By default, it's going to be vertical and it needs to be distributed center. That is perfect. And I don't want a gap in between these at all. So I'm going to set that to 0. And now this is starting to look more like our design. On the left, let's just go ahead and hit T on the keyboard, put in a bit of text there. And we'll go down to our styles and let's grab the body text and set that to white so we can see it. And now that we have that set, I'm going to edit this text. I'm going to call this group app design because that's the name of the project. I'm then going to remove this style so I can edit it, and I'm going to change the line height down to 1.2. That looks a little bit better. And this is going to be a link, so I'm going to symbolize that with a medium weight. And then again, instead of positioning this manually inside of this left-hand column, we're going to select the left column. And you probably guessed it, add a stack to this. Pretty much the same exact thing, except here on the alignment, we're going to align it to the left, and the gap, we'll just set it to 0. And then we can do the same thing for the right side. For this text, however, I'm going to align this to the right, just so it looks like a mirror on each side. And then, of course, we need to add our layout to the right column. And this time we'll align it to the right, and we can remove our gap of 10. Now you'll see this is kind of touching the side of the browser, which we don't want. So we need to add a bit of padding. Normally what I would do is I would go to the hero section itself or whatever section it is, and I would add the padding here. And I can show you that. So if I just put 32, you'll see we have 32 padding all the way around. Now, the reason I don't want to do this is because you'll see here, it pushes in the entire column, which we don't want because we're going to have that background gradient color and we need it stuck to the side. So for this section in particular, I'm not going to add the padding to the section. Instead, I'm going to add it where it's needed, which is on the right and left columns. So on the right column, I'm going to add the padding to the right of 32. And to the left column, I'm going to add it to the left of 32 as well. So now we've got that space on the sides, and we still have our column touching the top and sides of our browser. All right, so the next thing we need to add to this is what I'm going to call the hero footer. I mean, it's basically a footer down here at the bottom. It's got a link to explore our designs, and it's got some contact stuff for us. And then we have the nav up top. So let's start with the nav, and then we'll add this bottom footer. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and collapse the hero section just to keep this nice and organized over here because our navigation is going to be on top of the hero section, so it's going to be outside of the hero section because we're going to want it to stick at the top of the page no matter what section we're in. So here in the pasteboard, I'm just going to drag over here, and I'm going to start with a bit of text, and my logo is literally just my name, just like that. And I'm going to go to the body sized font. Let's break that. Let's set this to 800. We're going to set it to 16 with a 1.2 line height since it is a link and not a paragraph. And then we'll bump that up to medium because this is going to link us to the home page. Next, I'm just going to hit F on the keyboard and drag a frame around that. And that's just going to nest that right inside of that frame. And I'll just double click and call this nav logo, something easy to remember. Then I'm going to immediately throw a layout on this and just make sure it's centered, centered, center. Everything's all good there. You can remove the padding if you'd like. And then for the width and height, what we need to do is fit to content. And that's going to fit it around our text. So if I were to actually change this later on, it's still going to fit around the text, which is great. So now all we have to do is add a bit of padding by separating all the sides by clicking this icon. And we'll do 12 on the top and bottom and 16 on the left and the right to give us a good amount of padding. And finally, we need to go down to the radius, and I'm going to put a very large number like 1000, so it makes it this nice pill shape. And then I'm actually going to duplicate this. So I'm going to hold Option and drag another one out. And this time I'm going to rename this to nav links. So normally you would have a nav bar and it would stretch the full width of the page up here. I'm actually just going to nest these fixed in the corner. So we don't really need to do that. If you are going to have a different logo here, you might want to set this to a fixed value for the height. That way you can set it here as well to match the same height for your kind of pill shape, or else it might look a little off if one's like a little bit larger than the other one. But my links are going to be the exact same font, so I don't have to worry about that. I'm just going to type in work, which is going to be my first link. And then I'm going to duplicate this with Command D 3 times. And I'll show you why we did that 3 in just a second. First, let's grab that nav links and let's distribute this horizontally. And I'm going to change the center one to a comma, and then the right one will be contact, because we're only going to have 2 links on our portfolio. Now, the reason I did 3 pieces of text is so we could add this comma separating them for a nice aesthetic. Now, we actually can't add a margin or padding to this, so all we have to do is right-click on the comma and add frame. So it will add a frame around this. I'm just going to call it spacer. It doesn't matter what you call it. With that spacer selected, I'm going to add a layout to this, and I'm also going to set this to fit content for both the height and the width. That's going to allow us to have access to the right padding. So we'll set that to 4, and that'll give us a nice space in between both of our links. So I'm just going to drag and drop it here into the design. It's automatically nested this, which I don't want. So I'm going to drag it above the hero section. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the nav links. Just throw it in and then drag it above the hero section. So now we have our logo, links, and hero section. And now you see we have our hero section that's 100% viewport height here. And we have these things above it. We don't want that. We want it laying on top of it. So we're actually going to fix it to the screen. So with nav logo selected, I'm going to go to type, fixed. And then I'm going to make sure that our constraint is the top here. You can see that with the blue line and the left. And we want this to be 32 and 32 to have that perfect positioning, 32, 32 there. And we'll do the same thing for the nav links. We'll go up here, say fixed. And again, we're going to make sure it's connected to the top. And we want to make sure it's constrained to the right. And then we'll put our values of 32 and 32 in. Now, one huge thing we need to set for both of these is the Z index. And that determines what's on top of what. It's kind of, think of it, if you're looking at your screen, this nav needs to be on top of the hero section at all times, and any other thing needs to slide behind it. It needs to always be accessible. So we need to set the Z index to something higher than that of the rest, which is a default value of 1. So by setting it to something like 8, it will make sure it's always on top of everything that has a value less than 8. So I'm going to do that for both the nav links and the logo. And the reason I'm doing 8 is because we are going to have page transitions and other things that need to go over top of these. And for that, we'll use 9 and 10 respectively. So that's kind of how the Z index is going to work for that. Next, let's create the footer for the hero section. So if you go up here to layout in the top left corner, below frame, we also have rows and columns, which just speeds up this process so much. So we don't have to add the layout itself. We can just drag and drop this in, and it's got a frame with a layout in it and 2 frames in it. So I'm going to duplicate this so we have 3 frames. And then I'm going to call this stack hero footer. And let's get it out of the kind of pasteboard area. So let's drag it under the hero section, but make sure horizontal group is on top of it. Now, don't worry if yours broke and it looks something like this. All you have to do is make sure the hero section direction is vertical instead of horizontal, and that will make sure this looks nice and good. Next, I'm going to grab the hero footer, and I want this to fill the width. So I'm going to change it from a fixed value to fill. And we don't have any content in here, so I'm going to leave the fixed value for the height for now. And just to stay nice and organized, I'm going to go through and name these. Once again, left, center, and right, just so we know which one we're working with. So in the left one, let's hit T on the keyboard to grab the text tool. And let's type in the @caleredwards or whatever your is for most of your social media. I'm going to put that in there. Then under the styles, let's go to the body alt. So this is the first alternate text we're using. And again, I'm going to break the style because I want to make sure everything's set right. Roberto condensed. And this is going to be on black once I remove this color. So let's go ahead and change that to white. And then everything else looks good. Now we can just copy that and paste that into each one of the sections. And then I'm going to grab left, center, and right, and then make sure we remove the fill colors. So now we have some text in there, but they're not aligned. So with all three of these selected, which you can do so just by clicking one and then holding Command and clicking the other ones, we're going to go up to the layout and add a layout here. And here I'm going to set this to horizontal. We're going to have to change distribute for each one individually, but we want the align to be centered. And we can go ahead and set a default gap of 16. That'll come into play a little bit later. So what we want to do is we want to grab the left one now individually, and we want to change the distribute to start. That will put it on the left. And for the right, we'll do the end, which will put it on the right. Now for the padding, like I said before, if we can, I like to add it to the parent, which in this case will be the hero. So we'll just go ahead and add 32 padding all the way around. And you can see we have nice spacing there. And since we have content inside of hero footer now, we can go ahead and change this from a fixed value to fit content. Now nothing's happening because the left, center, and right have a fixed value. So we'll go ahead and select all of those once again, and then change them from fixed to fit content. And I'm going to have this at contact@email.com. Now, we're not going to make any of these links active just yet. I'm just putting the text here, and we'll do that in a bit. So the next thing here in the center is this needs to be bumped up to actually medium, because this is going to be a link that takes us to our work. And it's going to be a little bit different. If you remember in the Figma design, we have this nice icon here. So I've exported this icon here in Figma as an SVG. You can name it whatever you want, save it wherever you want. And then once you've done that, we'll just drag this in to Framer. So I'm just going to drag it in and drop it. And we'll see I've named it arrow icon. And it's this nice SVG of our icon. So all we have to do is just drag this in and just drop it here and make sure it's nested in the center. If it's not, just drag it around until you get it nested there. I'm going to call it Explore Designs. And of course, we need to change this to our green color so that it stands out a little bit more. And with both of these selected, so you can click on the first one, hold Shift and grab the arrow. I'm going to right click and add a frame around them. And the reason I'm doing this is so later when we add the hover effect on this, we want to have the hover effect or the link on the icon and the text. So here on this frame, I'm just going to simply set it to fit content for both the height and the width, and just match the gap at 16 to get it back the way it was. And I'll just name this Explore Link. And I believe we have the foundations of our hero set up. So if we go up here and hit the play button in the top right, we can see what we have here. And since we've been using these stacks throughout, this design is starting to behave the way we want it when we get larger and smaller. Of course, it's going to break when it gets to around tablet and mobile because we have no responsiveness whatsoever. We'll add that in a bit later. But for now, this is looking pretty good. We are covered on the desktop, and anywhere further, if you have an ultra-wide monitor, everything is on the sides and the corners the way we want it. Now, one thing I like to do in my designs is I like to make sure that these can't collapse vertically. So if I drag this in here, you'll see that we can't really see anything and we can't scroll. So how we can fix that is just by going to the hero section itself. We can go over here to the min max, select this icon, and we can set a minimum height value. And this will prevent it from getting any smaller than whatever we set this to. Let's just set it to 700. You can play around with this and do whatever you'd like. But now if I go back into play and we collapse this down to, that's probably smaller than 700 pixels. As you can see here, it's 431. We have a scroll bar up here, and this entire section does not get any smaller than 700. Just makes it look a little better if someone were to collapse it like this. It makes everything not break. All right, so now let's start getting into some of the more cool stuff. Let's add that gradient on the sides. When you start hovering over this text, it kind of glows on the side a bit. So to do that, what I'm going to do is first I'm going to go to the left side, and we'll do it over here first. What I'm going to do is just add a frame in here. And this is going to break the layout for just a moment, but that's okay, because what we're actually going to do is set this to absolute. So it is outside of the normal structure of the website. Now, since it is absolute on the left, I want to dock it on the left, the top, and the bottom, and set all of them to 0. And then when it comes to the width, I'm going to set it to 200 to match that of the section that we created. And for the height, I want to make sure that it is set to viewport 100 VH. And the reason we can't see it is we need to go to the left and we need to make sure the overflow is set to visible. And then we need to go to horizontal group itself and make sure the overflow is also set to visible. And now we'll see that rectangle from the top to the bottom. Now you'll see we currently can't see this text. So I'm going to drag this above. That doesn't do anything. I'm just doing that for ordering. I'm going to select this text and I'm going to go to the styles, hit the plus and add the Z index. And I'm going to set the Z index to 2, which will put this on top of that rectangle and make sure it's visible at all times. Same thing down here with the hero footer. I want to make sure the Z index on that one is set to 2 as well before I forget. And then we can style this here. So let's select the highlight left and go to the fill. And then we can choose a gradient, which is the second tab. And I'm just going to hover over the top here so I can rotate the gradient around, make it horizontal. And then on the left side, we'll have our green color, which is just our primary color. And I'm going to apply this to both sides. And then on the side on the inside here, we're going to have this at 0% opacity. And then on the outside here, we'll set this to about 8 or so, just so we get this nice glow effect. But by default, we want this opacity to be set to 0, so we can't see it. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So this time I'm just going to simply copy highlight left, and then in right, I'm going to Command V to paste it. And then I'm going to make sure I remember to swap my gradient over. So let's turn the opacity back on. So let's go ahead and rotate that around like so. And then we have that glow on this side. And now all we can do is drag this down to 0% opacity. And if you remember, we need to make sure that this text right here has a Z index higher than that, which would be 2. And then we are good to go. And of course, don't forget to rename this to highlight right, just so you know which one it is. And I'm going to select this one and hold Command and select the other one. So we have both highlights selected. So now let's add the first effect of this course. So I'm going to go here to Effects, add a plus, and it's super simple. We're just going to grab the hover. So what we're looking at here is the end state. What's going to happen when it's currently hovered. So I want the opacity to go up to 1 from the original value of 0. And then that's pretty much it. And we can make this look a little smoother just by going down to the transition. And instead of having it a spring, which is kind of bouncy, I want to go to ease and then ease out, which means it's going to gradually slow down at the end. And then we can just leave all the numbers here to default. And then when we go to the live preview, now when we hover over here, you'll see we have this. Now, of course, we're clipping over here, and that is because I forgot to set on the right frame overflow to visible. So make sure you set that to visible if you have a clipping issue. It's usually that is the problem. So there we go. Now when we hover over here, the screen kind of glows. Now we're going to have a cursor effect pop up and show an image. So that's going to actually explain what the heck's happening when you're hovering over here. Because right now, UX-wise, doesn't really make a lot of sense. We need kind of a custom cursor to really show why this is glowing. It means we're going to go to that project page. And we'll set that up right now. All right, so let's actually set up the custom cursor. Now, this is going to be something we're going to build upon throughout the videos in this course. I just want to get the basics set up here for the hero section. So what we need is a cursor that drags behind a little bit when you move your mouse. And it's just going to be a little dot. And then when you hover over the side, it's going to show you an image of this project or this project. So we only have 2 to showcase here on the home screen. So it's not too complex to set up. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit F on the keyboard for frame. And I'm just going to drag one out that is about, let's do 24 by 24. And I want this to be quite small. And I'm going to put it up here next to our website. And I'm going to set the default color to our primary green and then add a radius of 1000. So we have a circle. Now we can right click on this and we can create this to a component, which I'm simply just going to call cursor. So with our cursor, what we can do is add variations of this. So this is the default variation. So I'm actually going to name that default, just so it's very easy and simple to remember. The next thing I'm going to do is hit plus here on the right, and that will add a new variant. So I'm going to create a variant for each of my projects. So this one's going to be called the project name. So what we're going to do here is change the size of this to 400. And then I'm actually going to unlock this here, which allows me to change the height separately. We'll set this one to 226, and I'm going to remove the radius for now. So we have that of kind of an image shape. Now I'm going to go over here to the fill, and I'm going to swap this to an image, and then we'll set the radius now to, let's go with 24. And then I want to add a border of, let's just go with white, and then let's lower the opacity on this to like 25%, just very subtle there on the edge for kind of a glass effect. And that's pretty much it. So I'm going to do that one more time. So I'm going to click a new variant here and just change this image. So now we have our 3 variations of our cursor. Of course, we're going to keep adding to this, like I said, but for now, that will do. So with that over there, I'm just going to drag this all the way up top above the desktop. So the way I like to order things in Framer is I like to have the components and the things that are going to be on each page at the top, just so I don't forget them. They're not lost in the sauce over here in the layers. So first thing, let's select the desktop, and we need to actually add this cursor. So I'm going to do so by clicking the plus, and we're going to select a custom cursor. For the component, we have only one component, so that's our cursor, and the variant will be default, and I'm going to set this to follow. So I'm just going to change the offset a bit to -12 and -12, and then let's add a bit of a transition here. I'm going to lower the stiffness down a little bit, and you can play around with this and then just go up here and hit the play and kind of drag your mouse around to see what you like and what you don't. I'm just kind of getting it where I usually like it for a follow cursor, and that looks pretty good. So we'll close that. And now if we hit the preview, you'll see we have this nice little cursor that follows our mouse around, and that looks really nice. And when my mouse is still, since we set it to -12 and -12, which is half of 24, it's directly in the center of my pointer, which is what I want. Now we're going to add the other hover effects and stuff later, but for now, let's just get the image hover here working. So what we want to do is we want to have, when we come into this section over here, we want the gradient to show up. So we're going to select the right one first, and then also hold Command and grab the left one. So we have both of these frames selected. So we'll hit Add a Cursor, Custom Cursor, and make sure we select our cursor. Again, we want this one to follow. I'm going to align it to the left, and then I'm going to push it over 24 and 24. And then we can add a different spring to this. I'm going to go with that same one. It's like around 311. And the damping is like 76. Now, of course, we want to change the variant for each one respectively. So I'm just going to click off on the pasteboard, and then I'm going to grab the left one on its own, and we'll go here and change this to groups, which is the title we have here. And then over here, I'm going to make sure we have the right one selected only, and then change it to the corresponding project. So now when we hit preview, you'll see the cursor changes to this image, but it looks a little weird on the right side. And that's because we need to flip this around on the right side and have it hover on the other side of the mouse. So we'll go ahead and select right, and we'll go here and align that to the right. And then on the X offset, we want it to go to the left. So we'll -24. That will push it over to the left. And there, when we hover over here, you'll see it's on the left side of the mouse, and on this side, it's on the right side of the mouse. So the image is always in view for this custom cursor. Now, the transition between the dot and the image, I don't really like. So how you can do that is you go back to your cursor, and for each one of these, you can change the transition here. So I'm going to set the default transition for this cursor to an ease out and lower it down to 0.3. But then for the images, I want it to be instant. I want them immediately to switch. There's no weird transition of the shape morphing. I just want it to literally be instant. And so with that, you'll see this looks a lot cleaner. As I go over here, it's instantly changing to this image. Same thing over here. Now we'll add the rest of these hover effects later when we actually add the pages and set these links up. But for now, I think that's going to do it for this video. Of course, special thanks to Framer for sponsoring this entire course and making it free. You guys here on YouTube. If you're watching through this series to see if you want to dive into Framer, I highly recommend it to build websites. Link is at the top of the description, so make sure you check out Framer. If you're not subscribed and you want to follow along with the series, make sure you subscribe to get that notification. And as always, have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.